The final piece is to get 2 stars up here. Renzo Mostacci, CIO at Uniting here in New South Wales. Uniting being one of the largest not-for-profit aged care providers in the country. And Peter Gunn, who's a board director with BlueCross Aged Care, which is one of the largest aged care providers in Victoria. So gentlemen, if you'd come up and we'll fly through some questions. I'll start with you first, Pete. If we think about staff attraction and retention and some of the challenges, both in your role as a board director at Blue Cross, but also as a technology consultant, seeing a lot of aged care providers out there. I'm just interested in your thoughts in terms of what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think we've heard a lot about it this morning from the speakers before us, and culture is clearly one of those things that is paramount to that, and having a good culture within the organisation. From a technology perspective, having good systems that make it easier for the workers to do their job helps in retention of staff.
Yeah, sure. What about you, Renzo?
Yeah, it is. When we think about our staff and what makes it easier to work here, work at an organisation, it's easier systems. It's also thinking about their individual outcomes. What are they looking for? They might be looking for flexibility. They might be looking for work-life balance or fitting with their life, with their timetable. So the more that our systems can give them, support them in the way that they can choose the types of times and patterns they want to work in a way that's not detrimental to the organisation.
Yes.
So there's a way of a rising tide, rising all ships.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned systems. I know that you've taken Uniting on a cloud journey over many, many years. Just interested in your thoughts around that, why you see that as important.
Yeah, it's the cloud strategy, and moving to cloud is important for Uniting and I think for organisations in many sectors, particularly here in our sectors. And that is, in order to be able to access the best technologies, the best systems, they are all going to be in a cloud environment, increasingly. And the capabilities you need as an organisation to be able to operate in a cloud context are not trivial. They're not overly burdensome, but they're not trivial. And so an organisation, in order to be able to get access to those better capabilities from a technology point of view, needs to be there and needs to build the capabilities in their organisation to operate in a safe, secure way that ensures the resilience of systems. And certainly from a cloud perspective, you can increase the resilience of your technology by operating from the cloud. And to supplement that, the access to the marketplace, you're going to have access to a much wider support and vendor services in the cloud.
Yeah, makes sense. Any comments on that, Pete?
Yeah, look, I would agree, and I think you're seeing that with the vendors like yourself, where they only are offering cloud-based solutions.
Yes.
From a SaaS perspective, you're seeing it at infrastructure, you're seeing it at the software level as well, and it is, in my opinion, the better way to move, rather than having it in a data centre on your own stack.
Yeah. And if you think about the rise of technology, and it's been a big theme across most of the speakers actually, Pete, in your role, your dual roles really, but particularly as you're helping organisations go through technology change, what are you seeing as really important from a technology adoption perspective?
Integrated systems probably would be the biggest thing. There are a lot of disparate systems out there, and the whole key and the whole challenge is to get those systems talking to one another so that we can get good data that produces good outcomes for both our residents and our staff. And it's across the whole gamut of systems that exist, from ERPs to HRS, payroll, financial systems, all of that. We're seeing I'm seeing through my clients a bigger buy-in on those executives and general managers getting involved in actually speccing and making the understanding of what it is they need that system to do in order to achieve what it is we need to achieve from an outcome perspective.
Yeah, sure. You'd be similar, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd probably some great points there, Peter, and add from, what are we looking from our systems? You talk about integration, how important that is. And I think I look at it as the overall ecosystem, not only within your own organisation, but across the sector, including government. And, when we think about what does integration mean, integration really is about how do you provide services holistically that are not interrupted by artificial barriers anywhere. And so the government has a role here as well in the way that they facilitate that that ecosystem and ensuring data can flow across that ecosystem, workflows can flow across the whole ecosystem beyond in a borderless way.
Yeah, sure. A lot of talk around the rise of wearables, some of the what I call smart home care technology, the sensors, the smart plugs, etc., which are very interesting. What are you seeing, Pete? Are you seeing much of that?
Adoption is slow, is what I would say at the moment. Certainly from a wearables perspective, I'm seeing it more in remote monitoring care for the acute sector, where they're really trailblazing on some of that stuff. The wearables technology, I mean, everybody, half the people in this room are probably all wearing a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or a Samsung 4 or something. The problem with it in the resi sector is that the battery life has always been a problem. And how do you manage that? Some of the technology is moving closer to being longer and irrigated, but what it does do from a wearable perspective is gives you the data about a particular resident in order to give you predictable outcomes about what you can and can't do, and the health of that particular resident as well. I think one of the better technologies that's coming through is the radar technology. Some of the guys out there have got it, the sensing and the reading of the vitals without it being intrusive.
Sure.
And the radar technology is really quite exciting because it's really all it is plug and play. Yeah, right. And it gives you the ability to bring that data back into a platform. What you do with the data is the next question. How you manipulate that data or read that data, and who's looking at it. But the radar technology, I think, is really the next space certainly for resi sector, and it has is applicable to IOUs and home care as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have thought so. What about you, Renzo?
And certainly, from an engineering perspective, all of those technologies have come a long way, and they're moving quickly, and they're going to continue to move quickly. So that's not going to be a limitation. Engineering, the capability to collect data and to monitor. Where I do, and we talk about slow take-up, and I think that slow take-up is sometimes a function of not knowing what to do with the data. And I suppose where we do need leadership is in how we think about the health outcomes of our clients, how we think about the services that our clients want, and not being limited in our thinking about those, because we know we could almost, from an engineering point of view, get just about any data that we need. So it's almost reimagining what services are, reimagining what's possible from a health outcomes point of view. And then once that's reimagined, then you can think, well, how do we organise to deliver that service operationally? And only then do we say, great, let's get the engineers and we'll use all of that great stuff that's out there to provide a system that delivers on that, because the engineering and the tech is there. Yeah. We need the leadership in what we want to do with it.
Yeah, sure. And I guess a final question, then we may have time for the audience to ask some. If you think about, and don't name them, but if you think about technology implementations that haven't worked so well, are there any learnings you can share for the audience? Because I'm sure there's plenty of people thinking about adopting some sort of technology at some point. Start with you, Renzo. You're smiling.
Yeah, sure. The more something is just straight out engineering infrastructure, the clearer requirements tend to be around that. And sometimes we think about, we want to do something new, and we come up with a list of requirements. I think the more we channel down the point of trying to say, here it is, let's get a list of requirements, then we'll ask someone to go and deliver on that, the more we'll fail. And that's where I see failures or expectations not being met. I think where I see more success is where the focus is on vision and outcomes, and then co-designing with a broader cohort across your organisation and with the vendor community in co-designing. And so when I think of the word co-design, I mean co-designing around a really clear articulation of vision and outcome.
Sure. Yeah, as opposed to lines in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yep. I agree with you there for sure. What about you, Pete? What advice would you have?
Oh, I think from an implementation perspective, the organisation's making sure that they're getting behind the system or applications that they're putting in and that it's resourced well enough and that the change management is key to everything.
Yes.
To making sure that system implementation is successful. If you don't get behind it, then you might as well not do it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So Chris, if we've got time for questions, we might open to the audience in case anyone has a burning question before lunch. It's tough competition between questions and food. We get that.
I've got a question again, if I may, because I found this a really interesting subject. Enzo, your comments about the first step is to reimagine the service that you are seeking to achieve and then designing the tech around that, if I understood you correctly. I'd like to ask you, as perhaps one of the most senior IT people in the sector, how often do you see the marketing people get involved in putting forward a strategy to get to an end customer and then consulting with the IT people?
I have to say I've seen that come a long way, is my starting comment. And the better those working relationships are, and those working relationships are better where there is a true understanding around, shared understanding of what's been sought, what the objective is. And I find that we're getting success there in that place because we talk about objectives and outcomes. We don't talk about technology anywhere near in the first instance. So yes, you build that way of working. So it is about a way of working within an organisation.
Frank, in the first presentation this morning, mentioned that they've committed to Salesforce as a CRM system, and it's a far more complex beast than that. But that goes to the fact that in the ageing journey, with the loss of bed licenses and opening up of home care and so on, it's important for rack operators to get vision of the customer far earlier. Otherwise, those that can build the relationship early with the customer as they enter what is now CHSP, that customer will build a relationship with that organisation and not be available for a rack operator by the time they get to that stage. So that goes to the marketing. Are you seeing much of that, the focus on how do we get to the customer and build our relationship, that marketing function?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, from a data point of view and knowledge point of view, is actually designing your overall enterprise architecture around those principles, so that the notion of a single view of client and understanding of that client. So it's really taking those principles. Sometimes you might call it a marketing objective or principle. I think it's your business principles, your business objectives, and ensuring you take those directly and can see them reflected in the overall ecosystem and design of the whole ecosystem. And a CRM, a platform in that, plays a key role in those outcomes.
But these days, it's not only a CRM system; it's also, it's the way you advertise, isn't it? It's the messaging within the advertising and capturing data there, and how you manipulate it, and so on. It goes far deeper.
Yeah, it does, and I suppose the consistency of, say, that content and the consistency across all different parts of that engagement with clients, future clients, present clients, and ensuring that language and content is consistent, means that the way that you would design your platforms, your key platforms in an organisation, don't stand alone. And I just don't mean just integrating, but the way that the data is structured in all of those systems the way that you even keep the data in your data lakes and warehouses is consistent with how you view your clients throughout that journey.
And that then goes to, the one client record, one health record, interoperability with government, and providing that seamless experience. So when you two gentlemen sit down with, the CEO says, right, we need to make all this happen, who are the people that you want to see at the table discussing all of these things as from an IT point of view? Which executives in their roles?
From my perspective, depending on the system that you're putting in, probably nearly all of the leadership team
Yep.
and the execs. Because if they don't get on board, then the people below them aren't.
Yeah, same answer for me. It's all of them. They all have a role to play in the success of that outcome. And yeah, and you use the term there. You say, the single record, single source of truth. I think that can sometimes be a little bit of an inhibitor to the thinking around the outcome, because a single record or single source of truth is actually in of itself not the objective. The objective is that you can ensure the quality and the ease of access to the right data at the right time in that process, or at that time, at that particular moment when you need it and you know it's right. And that can be solved in many different ways from an engineering or a design point of view. It can be one record, one system. It can be many other approaches as well. And that's where I go back to a comment I made earlier, this notion of requirement versus objective, because sometimes in trying to articulate requirements associated with an objective, people try to imagine what the solution might be. And so that can be dangerous. We need to stay with understanding outcomes and objectives rather than try to start off with guessing what a solution might look like.
So IT people are very focused and it's very detailed, but you're talking about understandings and objectives, and which is sort of more macro and subjective to a large degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly my marching orders to my teams is never ask any part of the organisation, what's your list of requirements?
Because they'll tell you?
Because they'll make their best guess of what that is in their imagination of what the solution might be. And I think that's not a fair question to ask.
And I had to ask Michael about your predictive AI with RMIT. We discussed it over dinner down in Melbourne, but that to a degree is one of the most exciting things to be coming forward, isn't it?
Yeah, I would have thought so. I mean, we have to reimagine how we can be more proactive in this space with data, and they're a fantastic group of people that we're working with, and they're committed to making sure that we'll nail this by June 30. So yeah, I'm really excited to see where we get to. Will it be Nirvana first cut? Maybe not, but I'm hearing that they've made a lot of progress, so I'm expectant.
And when we're talking about cloud, I have heard that across all the operators in aged care in Australia, just over 50% of them are in the cloud. I couldn't believe that. I would have thought today, especially with the security and what we saw happen to Regis, for instance, that everybody would be in the cloud by today.
So I'm probably going to defend the competition now, which is a bit unusual, Chris. But the reality piece is, as a sort of former shareholder in the eye care business, we were pretty much focused on resi. Before we sold to Telstra Health, we had 35,000 beds, which most of those organisations, those software vendors, wouldn't necessarily have that many, and we weren't making any money. So when you've got as a software vendor the challenge of constantly coming up with new functionality, meeting compliance requirements, unless you get a cash injection to really rebuild the technology layer, which is what has been good from a Telstra Health perspective for us, it's a real challenge. Australia's a small market, and quite rightly, everyone in this room has massive expectations. The challenge is, as a smaller operator, it's hard to meet them,
And the cloud allows that to happen.
Well, the cloud allows it to happen. The challenge is you actually have to spend a fair bit of cash to get a product that's suitable for the cloud. So it's a bit of a catch-22. It's a bit like the theme of the conference. Money's got to come in from somewhere.
Yep.
We're lucky we found ours.
And so just before we finish up, is there any other questions? I've been hogging the floor in terms of questions. Most important area? No? Can we show our appreciation for the gentleman? Thank you very much.